Hello you beautiful people, Aaron here, back with another video. With Sumeru coming out very soon, you might be wondering if you should get Tighnari. Well, I'm here to help show you what he can do and how well. I want to hop right into it, but first, if you like my content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, any builds shown later in the video are done with very high stats and are nigh impossible, but are more representative of what you can expect with Tighnari. If you do want to peruse through this video at your own leisure, there are chapters in the description to help you all out. Okay, now let's get into it. What can Tighnari do? Tighnari is a quick swap DPS Dendro character that has a focus on his charge attacks. He deals a crazy amount of damage to a single target with his entire kit. His charge shots are able to charge up twice like Ganyu and Yoimiya, but unlike those two who have a 2-second charge up time, Tighnari seems to have a 2.5-second charge up window. When the second charge shot hits an enemy, it will spawn 4 cluster bloom arrows that seek out and home in on enemies. At Ascension 1, when he fires off his level 2 charge shot, his elemental mastery increases by 50 for 4 seconds. His elemental skill has Tighnari toss out an orb in front of him, dealing AoE Dendro damage while also taunting enemies. This ability also grants a passive effect to Tighnari that allows Tighnari to charge up his level 2 charge shot almost instantly. Tighnari's burst has him shoot off a volley of homing arrows ahead of him, dealing Dendro damage. When these arrows deal damage, they will then send out another volley to deal even more damage. At Ascension 4, both his elemental burst and second level charge shot gain damage bonuses based on 0.06% of his elemental mastery, which caps at 60% or 1000 EM. His constellations are just damage buffs that increase his charged attack crit rate, grants him Dendro damage bonus and elemental mastery, and his C6 increases his on-field viability by an absurd amount by granting him even more decreased charge shot time by making his level 1 almost instant, plus it grants him another projectile from his level 2 charge shot that deals increased damage. With his C6, he is able to heavily outscale most other current main DPS options in damage output, which is great since he's so much easier to get. The thing that stinks is that none of his other constellations give him the same damage boost I can expect him to get with his C6. Anyways, onto elemental application, which does matter for him since his application tells us where his damage will increase with spread. He has no ICD on both his charged attack and elemental skill, which is great because those allow him to easily apply Dendro to proc Quicken. His second level charge shot has a 4-hit ICD, which means only one of his 4 shots will be able to proc the spread reaction and get the damage boost. His elemental burst, on the other hand, has normal ICD. Since it shoots off a barrage of 6 arrows that then turn into 6 more arrows for a total of 12, this means that he can proc spread 4 times with his burst. So he will be able to apply Dendro to a single enemy approximately 11 times during a quick swap rotation. Because he is a quick swap unit, he is going to want some energy recharge. Since his burst costs only 40 energy, and since his skill generates an average of 10.5 energy to himself, he can ignore a lot of energy recharge requirements. His energy requirements lessen even more due to his team options and elemental pairings. Having another Dendro unit on the team can help battery Tighnari while also granting 100 elemental mastery to the entire team. And since Tighnari wants to use Aggravate, pairing him with 2 Electro characters will grant the entire team Electro Resonance, which will also battery the entire team, even if it's just a little bit. So just throw a bit on him, like maybe 10%. Aggravate, while scaling really well with elemental mastery, actually scales harder with multipliers instead. So a good crit rate to crit damage ratio is absolutely needed. Lastly, we got the good old elemental mastery, which Tighnari makes major use of due to Aggravate and because of his Ascension 4 damage multiplying passive. The last thing you can run on him is attack, which is good since it increases normal base damage. This is great for his multi-hit attacks since the damage from his level 2 charged attack shots that do not proc spread are heavily reliant on attack to deal any sort of damage. So in order of importance, his most important stat would be multiplier stats like crit rate and crit damage, as well as Dendro damage bonuses wherever you can find them. Then you got elemental mastery, which counts as not only a base damage bonus, but also a multiplier for him as well. Then there's attack percent to help out all his damage. Lastly, we got energy recharge. that good old 10%. These are generally the stats we're looking for on our artifact sets. But what artifact set should we look for? Well, we got a few to start out with. First is the one made for Dendro, the Deepwood Memory set. This set grants a 15% Dendro damage bonus in the 2-piece while also shredding Dendro resistance by 30% in the 4-piece. And there's the other new set, the Gilded Dream set, which grants 80 elemental mastery in the 2-piece and also grants 50 to 150 extra EM and 14 to 42% extra attack based on team composition. Tighnari's Ascension 4 passive can turn this elemental mastery amount into 4.8 to 13.8% damage bonus for his elemental burst and charged attacks. At max EM stacks, this becomes almost the same percentage damage increase that he gets from the 2-piece of Deepwood, while also gaining a base damage bonus on Aggravate. Then we got the Wanderer's Troop set, which also grants 80 elemental mastery or 4.8% increased damage for his charge attacks and bursts in the 2-piece, but in the 4-piece, he gets a straight up 35% damage bonus onto his charged attacks. Well, which set is his best? Well, it's time to look at numbers. The total numbers on screen now are the average damage per quick swap rotation, aka 1 skill, 1 burst, and then 3 charged attacks. As you can see, despite Deepwood giving him the lowest damage multiplier of any build, it comes out on top. This is simply due to its passive effect on the 4-piece that could be slotted onto any member in the team for the effect to work on him. So while it is his best damage overall set, the fact that you can throw onto Kole, Dendro Traveler, Zhongli, or Kokami means that you will get more out of Tighnari if you use the Deepwood set on someone else instead of him. This means that the Gilded Dream set and Wanderer's Troop set are his best two instead, with Gilded Dreams being worth about 6.7% more. However, there are some downsides to Gilded Dreams. While it is better, this set relies on using the elemental reaction in order to get the benefit. If in the overworld, and if you don't want to use like a Beto Burst on a group of Hilichurls, this set will deal less damage. It specifically relies on proccing an elemental reaction, which can be harder to do or less worth it outside of the Abyss. There is also the fact that this set's damage does lower by comparison if using another Dendro character. Both sets might gain 100 elemental mastery due to the extra Dendro character, but unlike Gilded Dreams, Wanderer's Troop does not lose anything for the extra character. I'll show this gap closing now with a team comp just meant to hyper buff Tighnari. Tighnari is paired with Lisa for the Electro and defense shredding, as well as a Hakushin and Instructor's buff. Then there's Zhongli with Tenacity and his Aura Resistance Shred. And finally is Kole, instead of a Dendro Traveler because I forgot they existed to carry the Deepwood set. These numbers are now on screen. In this situation, the Gilded Dream set is only about 2.5% better, which really is not a lot at all. This does matter because it shows the entire value of farming good pieces in the new domain for your Tighnari. While it may be a domain that you definitely do want to farm, Wanderers has been out since launch, and you most likely already have a really good set for Tighnari. It's the point that you might want to just use Wanderers for a few months on him before switching over, as the substats matter far more than 4-piece set in this case. Because of this, I will be using the 4-piece Wanderers for the rest of the video unless stated otherwise, as it is what most people should be running when Tighnari launches and for a long while after. With artifacts aside, you might have looked at his damage and audibly said, "What the fuck?
That's a lot of damage!"
And well, you're right, it is. Tighnari was initially teased by leakers to have huge damage comparable to the likes of Ganyu, so that's what we're going to do. However, there is one major difference between the two. Ganyu has AoE, whereas Tighnari is single target focused. So let's add in Yoimiya too for more of a visualization. But before I throw the numbers on screen, I feel like we need a clear damage per rotation area, and since both Ganyu and Tighnari basically don't have an actual limit to their uptime, we'll be going with Yoimiya's 10-second uptime of her skill. In this duration, Yoimiya can get about 3 full rotations of her normal attacks. For these rotations, I will have her vape every 3rd and 5th hit, since that is what she is designed around. Ganyu is also running with Melt, and melts every charged attack because she can. Yoimiya has a Shimenawa's, and Ganyu holds a Wanderer's Troop like Tighnari. Oh, and each hold their signature weapon. Okay, now to toss them up for their 10-second duration. As you can see, Tighnari actually competes quite well with the other two when unleashing his full kit. Yoimiya, being the single target damage queen when she can actually vape consistently, has the highest damage output on a single target. While Ganyu may fall behind in this category, she makes up for it with her area of effects damage. Tighnari, on the other hand, is specifically single target focused, but he has two things going for him. His damage is more consistent than Yoimiya's, since his attacks ICD can't get messed up during a rotation. He also has another benefit of being more bursty, while the other two excel more in their prolonged uses. So let's throw a ball in this puppy cat's court and shorten the duration to suit him instead, aka about half the time. In this time frame, not only does Ganyu creep up on Yoimiya's single target damage, but Tighnari completely obliterates them both, as he deals about 47% more damage than Yoimiya in this allotted time frame. This reinforces the idea that he is technically not a main DPS at first, like Hu Tao, Tartaglia, or Eula might be, but instead he's more like Hazo, where you throw him on the field to do a massive amount of burst damage, then throw in another damage dealer to do the rest of the work. So in that sense, he could pair decently well with Kuching, Yaimiko, or the Raiden Shogun. His signature weapon seems to also take a liking to this sort of damage roll, as it only really works for his first two charged shots. Hunter's Path is obviously his best in slot weapon, but what about the others? What else can he run? Well, let's check. To start off, I'm going to compare the weapons in a stage where you play him as a main DPS. Then afterward, we'll switch over to Quick Swap DPS. Also, in this weapon comparison, I am not adding Blackcliff Warbow, simply because killing multiple enemies over a period of time is not a strength of Tighnari's. He technically can use this weapon for bursting down 3 separate targets, but all he gets is a decent attack boost for it, which is good, but not something Tighnari really wants too much. So with all that anti-synergy and having to make it work, I'm just not going to incorporate it. On screen now are the numbers for each within a main DPS window, and listed from best to worst. Obviously, Hunter's Path is at the top. You're not going to beat this weapon. It's way too good on him. Something that did surprise me was the next weapon, the Polar Star. But in all fairness, it makes a lot of sense because it buffs his bursts of damage. It's so good that it is only 4.5% worse than his signature weapon. Then after that, it's Skyward Heart because of its absurd crit stats and extra damage. After that one, we get into the 4-star weapons, starting with Ally Hunter, which might seem odd at first, but the giant damage bonus it grants is really just a game changer on him. However, that is the last giant gap in damage that you'll see on this list, as everything else is pretty close in damage. The difference between Ally Hunter and the final spot is only about 6.4%, which basically makes all these weapons equal in value on him. What surprised me the most here is that Amos Bow and Stringless are both toward the bottom despite being seemingly good options for him. But when you think about it a bit more, it starts to make sense. Though it does buff his charge attacks, which do make up a good portion of his damage, the damage bonus is only 40%, which cannot keep up with the other insane buffs that also work for his burst and skill. The Stringless is in a similar situation for the opposite reason. The Stringless does grant a damage bonus buff to his elemental burst by 57.9%, but it only buffs his charge attack bonus damage by 9.9%. In this situation, this weapon just does not work well for a main DPS Tighnari. But what about a quick swap DPS Tighnari? Well, let's see. Changing to a quick swap DPS playstyle only really changes 4 of the bottom 5 weapons. Stringless becomes a lot better and Amos becomes his worst weapon option. This makes sense because in this scenario, more of his damage comes from his burst. However, this is all with Wanderers. What about the Gilded Dream set? Does this change anything? Actually, I'm going to add even more variables. I'm going to instead put these weapons in probable hands, aka I'm making these builds more realistic. I will also add in the Deepwood passive into the builds. Because of the more realistic factor to this piece, I asked you what weapons you intended to use for Tighnari. I actually asked multiple times and got some pretty good answers. From what I could gather, most people intend to use the Stringless, so I'm going to compare that with a weapon that was initially really strong in the past segment, like Prototype Crescent. The point of this segment is to not only give a better estimate of what you can expect in-game, but also show the difference that the amount of investment and the change of set has on the order of the list by using just 2 weapons. I want to try and shake something up to get the string list to be in a better position while still being decently realistic. Also, the Gilded Dream set will have 2 stacks of the EM buff and 1 of the attack buff. Now let's throw the numbers on screen. So what can we tell? Prototype still better? Absolutely. While the gap might not be as huge as it was at higher investments, the percentage difference is still absurdly similar. Prototype was better at high investment with Wanderers by about 5.1%, while at reasonable investment and the Gilded Dream set, Prototype is better by about 5%. So despite adding 3 different factors into the mix, nothing changed for Stringless. Of his best weapons, it sadly seems to be his 3rd worst option. However, since the difference in damage for his best 4-star weapon and worst is only about 6.4%, it's not like it matters too much. In the end, Tighnari is a decently strong single target damage dealer that seems to function better as a quick swap DPS option. He can also flex into the main DPS slot too, especially with higher constellations. He seems to have some great free-to-play weapon options that, while they can't rival his best weapons, can rival each other in strength. But what do you think about Tighnari? Do you think he's strong? How do you intend to build him? Are there other situations you think he can be useful? Tell me your thoughts about him in the comments down below. But that's all I have for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye!